Welcome to Inside Pleasantville School District. I'm Emily Rubin Persons, your host and Board of Ed trustee. It is the mission of the Pleasantville School District to provide a holistic education, emphasizing academic, social, aesthetic, physical, cultural, and ethical competencies. We offer our students an accepting and safe environment where they can achieve their full potential to become responsible citizens with strong moral character, high self-esteem, an appreciation of creative expression, and the self-motivation necessary to meet the challenges of the future. We are a district where learning is valued, differences are accepted, and wellness is encouraged and accountability realized. Our mission is to assure the development of each student's growth in a nurturing educational environment which will assist in the total development of each and every student. These are the mission statements, the combined mission statements on the 3 school websites. And at our February 9th meeting, the Board of Ed adopted the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Resolution. I was honored to have conversations with the teachers who will be leading this work, Melanie Siokolo, Dan Brink, and Rikki Saperstein. Okay, so I'm sitting here now with Melanie Siokolo, our new DEI Curriculum Coordinator. Thank you so much for sitting with me and talking with me. You know, we just created this new Board of Ed resolution on diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, and it's so great that we've got you and Rikki and Dan to help shape and more coordinate, because we've been doing a lot of work already. Absolutely. I mean, over these last, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, right? You know, with the ADL and just different things. So talk to us a little bit about what your role is going to be in this position.
Sure. So my name is Melanie Siokolo. I've been a teacher here at Pleasantville for 4 years, but I also taught in New York City for 4 years. I kind of envision, and what I've talked to our principal, Joe Palumbo, a lot about this role in terms of being the high school curriculum coordinator for DEI, is kind of helping teachers make the lessons specifically that they can use in the classroom. I know a lot of times we have these big ideas, and sometimes they can be super overwhelming for teachers that have many responsibilities. It's
the trends and learning the words and learning the content that can be brought in on top of everything that they're already trying to maintain with what they're required to get through. So you're going to assist in...
Yeah, I kind of want to help ease the burden a little bit and actually just give them something that they can use instead of, necessarily needing to do something on their own. But of course, they could modify and adapt whatever they would like for the different age groups. I think that, teachers want to do the work, but sometimes just don't know where to start.
It's overwhelming. There's so much content. And when you start to do the research, you think, like, which site is the right one to go to? What's the right language? And then there's other school districts that are doing a lot of work as well. So will you be reaching out to some of your colleagues?
Yeah, I absolutely would like to. I do have some connections in other schools, and I just would like to talk about, hey, this is kind of something what we envisioned. What maybe are you doing around this issue? Or maybe we could share some lesson plans. I think that's a great way to start. Right. And I certainly, I'm going to work with Dan and Rikki on taking some of their big ideas. And again, I think I kind of view my role as like making it specific, right? And actually apply it to the classroom, and writing those lesson plans, I think is where I really see my role. I really would love, to work with the middle school and the elementary school, and taking some of the lessons that maybe I'll provide for the high school and seeing how can we
filter them down.
Sure,
right.
Absolutely.
Because in many respects, K-12, it's the building blocks. What you learn in first grade, you go a little deeper in third grade, you go deeper in fifth grade, and we go. So that's really great. What about, the students? I would imagine you get a lot of input from your students as to what they need, what they want. Yeah. How do they know? How are they going to know to come to you?
Yeah, I think this is something that, Rikki and I especially have talked a lot over the last 2 years, is that, we can only make so many changes in terms of our curriculum without having student buyback, feedback. They need to kind of buy into, a little bit of what we're sharing with them. But I think that only goes if you already have that good relationship with the students.
It's, teacher-student communication is a big skill. Yeah. And having two children who are now out of the high school, I can really see the difficulty or the ease of being able to talk to your teachers. You know, many kids, they grow up thinking like, oh, the teacher is this person who is not very approachable. But it's a real important part of relationships to be able to talk with the teacher. So that would be something to, you know, I don't know, small group conversations to realize that, you know, you are so completely open to sharing and learning, because what goes on at the conversation at the dinner table, you want to facilitate and bring into the classroom. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and again, I think it just stems from like who you are as a teacher in the classroom, and just being vulnerable with your students and sharing experiences with your students automatically makes them, you know, have a different viewpoint of who you are and how you grew up. And I just think like having those honest conversations with your students from the get-go will provide for way better conversations later. Right. You know, and it's, imagine some professional development comes into this as well, right? Absolutely. I mean, some of our teachers, you know, things evolve. I mean, when I just think of like how far we've come with special education and the language that we use and don't use anymore, and the ease and comfort of our teachers with certain students and certain topics. And this is some of it as well, because if you're not exposed, you don't know. You don't know. You don't know. And I think that sometimes that's a lot of where it comes from is where the fears might come from, is lack of exposure. And if you're from a small area and haven't traveled, you just don't know. You just don't know. And you're from, you're Ukraine? You know, so I'm actually from Philadelphia, but my first language is Ukrainian. Right. Yep. My grandparents came here, you know, and my first language was Ukrainian. So you've traveled back and forth, and you know, and that opens up a whole world. And some people, you know, one of my really close friends from college has never left the country. He's like, I don't want to go. I'm nervous that I might not know the language, and you know, and that's a real. Whereas some people, it's like they're on an airplane every other. Well, not right now, but you know, they're constantly traveling and immersing themselves into different communities, and that's a big thing. But we can bring some of that here now with the internet. Absolutely. I mean, Sean Campbell and I, who I co-teach with ninth grade, we've really made a big effort this year in Global 9 to kind of share why it's so important that we're teaching and learning about global history. Right. Like, so when we talk about all these different dynasties in China, or, you know, rulers in India, or, you know, the Romans or the Mayans, and, you know, we kind of bring it back to why does this matter now? And it's everything. I mean, when we had a whole lesson, we were talking about, you know, Mongol rule in China, and we were talking about the Han Dynasty, and a lot of students were just kind of getting a little confused. And I was like, well, look what's happening right now, right? And it's so important. We were talking about different foods that were present, you know, and different cultures that exist. And at first, students were like, oh, you know, like, why would we eat that? That doesn't make sense. I was like, hold on. Right. You know? So it's so important to learn about other cultures, so that way when you know, get older and you're, you know, amongst, you know, many different populations in a different community, like your automatic, you know, gut instinct is not to be like, oh, what is that? It's like, oh, cool, I remember learning about that. Like, so I think that makes all the difference, especially in global history, I've found. Global history, and then it comes into all the different subjects. I mean, it's like, why do we have to learn this in math, or why do we have to learn this in science? I mean, as a public education district, we have to provide so many different opportunities. Nobody knows if they're going to be an artist or an environmentalist or a this or a that, and it's from providing all these different electives and providing all this content that we're exposing our students, and from the extracurriculars, and you know, from this kind of education with diversity and equity, to, I guess, to help people feel, I mean, we're all from somewhere, and we're all good. Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to have these types of conversations in the classroom where, you know, I try, especially in my AP Gov class, just to have,
kids feel comfortable to share their experiences. Because, I'm sure you can remember, I remember being in high school and being like really nervous to share my opinion and really nervous to share my past experiences. And, but I think if you have those types of conversations in a really kind of vulnerable space in a classroom, it can make so much more profound change than, anything else.
Right. And by bringing this down into the lower grades, it's helping the student find their voice and share their voice. And it's that self-awareness. And, it's an important skill. Yeah.
It's kind of like building your gut a little bit.
It's building your gut.
I always like that. When students have asked me, like, how do I know if a joke is, inappropriate, or, my friend said something I didn't like? Well, I was like, oftentimes you could kind of feel it. You can feel it in your gut, right?
You can feel it in your gut. Now, some people, some of our kids with different neurodiversities, they might not catch up on those. And that's where we need our friends to say, hey, you know what, that really wasn't very cool.
And learn from it.
And I think that's really important because, particularly in the younger grades, I mean, look, there's so much inappropriate content in songs, and our kids have these devices connected to the internet, and they're seeing all kinds of stuff at a very young age, and they don't understand that something might be more racist than, and they think it's funny because it's a cartoon, but it's like they don't understand. No, that's inappropriate. Well, he's singing it in the song, but why is it not appropriate? That's what's so hard. Particularly, by the time the kids get up to the high school, they kind of know. But those younger kids, it's like, oh, well, I didn't mean it. It's like, but by helping to build that voice with the curriculum, with the teachers learning how to maybe be a little less awkward or more comfortable, I think is a better word. With and it goes into all the different subjects. It's not just social. It's English and math, what else do you, we have so many notes. That's like such a big topic. There's the parent, the connection with home, as we were just saying, and getting into the students and learning more from them. Do you think you all might do a student survey to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. I know I've certainly informally asked a lot of my students about, what do they look for, what do they need, what are some things we can do. So I've absolutely gotten feedback from them. I know I did a lesson a couple weeks ago kind of addressing the anti-Asian American hate crimes that have been occurring. And I asked for feedback from my students after, just, what more do you need? Was this something that, was important? And I had many students just say, like, this is what we need. I mean, when the board first started having the student council join us at that December meeting, and it was great because one of the kids said, we want to hear this from our parents, or we want to hear this from the school. This is what we need. And unless we ask the kids, we're not going to know. And I know a lot of parents, they want to protect their children and like, oh, this isn't, they're too young for this. But there's age-appropriate ways of handling some pretty challenging. And particularly with the pandemic, I mean, our kids have been exposed to things. And so learning how to provide this type of education and awareness, K-12. Just imagine, in a few years, how those elementary kids will be more comfortable. I think that's the key, right? Is to realize we're all good. Just finding that student voice. I mean, building that, I think, is really important. I just come from teaching seniors and freshmen, and so it's already within those two, just a world of a difference. But I really advocate, for my students to just build that trust in themselves, to share their voice, that it's important, that it's valuable, and that they can be vulnerable and talk to their adults. And I think that's really, really important, is that they take ownership on themselves to make the change that they want.
And to be comfortable enough to say to a friend or to a teacher, hey, that was a little uncomfortable for me. Because, I mean, look, we're all human. Occasionally I've said the wrong thing, and it's like, I never want to offend anybody.
Of course,
and if I use the wrong word, or let me know so that I can learn from that.
It's all a learning process.
It's all a learning process.
And I think that's also something that, we as adults often have a hard time like addressing within ourselves that like sometimes we make mistakes and we have to learn from them, but like this is not something that's going to be immediate.
No,
like we have to build towards it.
This is years, and we're
kind of never ending, really.
No, it's never ending. I mean, there's constantly new trends, new information, and so with you and Rikki and Dan, we do have a lot of other school districts that are now also working on this, and there's. We have a community organization that I attend their meetings, and they're so ready to help.
Yeah.
They're so ready, and that's the community partnership, because they're out there in their own. Some of them are teachers. The people are coming from all over, and they know books, and they have articles or websites, so they're ready to share and be a part of this, which is really.
It has to be a collaborative space.
Has to be a collaborative space. So I think as time goes on, I mean, it's really hard with. Public education moves a little slow, little slow, but we move.
Yeah, we move.
We're constantly moving.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be talking with Rikki and Dan, and I'm interested in how they're going to be spearheading all of this. And again, we've done a lot, but we've got a lot more to go. Absolutely. So it's an ongoing conversation. But is there anything else in particular that?
No, I mean, I think we're just excited to do the work. I've worked a lot with Rikki and Dan. I'm going to continue to work with them.
Right.
They're kind of overseeing the operation, if you will. And, I'm excited to just
get going.
Just get to it.
Get to it. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll continue this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm now sitting here with Rikki Saperstein and Dan Brink, and we're just delighted to have you as our new diversity coordinators. So tell us, what's next? Where are we going? What's happening? It's a big question.
It is a big question, yeah. So we are currently 3 months into our role as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion coordinators. Right now, we are currently inventorying our practices K-12 across the district, speaking to the curriculum coordinators, speaking with the principals. We're about to enter some leadership meetings at each building to really gauge what we are doing well and what we are doing in general across the district.
We're doing a lot within each 3 buildings. There's a lot going on. Every conversation that we've had has been awesome. As a high school teacher, it's so amazing to hear what they're doing down at BRS and what they're doing in the middle school. And each school is doing a really good job at this point.
Right. Yeah. And we had that presentation in January with the 3 schools, giving you that map of what's already happening. So that's a great beginning blueprint.
Absolutely. And we've had follow-up conversations with the curriculum coordinators about that presentation, to really, asking follow-up questions about, okay, how is this working in schools? Who's delivering that? Really trying to find those leverage points where we can now go and say, this is what we would like to enact in the future based on what we're already doing really well.
Right.
So taking what we do, kind of synergizing those efforts and making it, even better. And I want to say that Pleasantville does so much. You talk to people from other districts, and the work that we're doing is just above and beyond already. And now we've also just heard from the state that, there's all these new initiatives out there that Pleasantville has already gotten a head start on.
Well, I have to say that the same thing when they made the ruling, I think it was about 2 years ago, about social emotional learning now being required to be K-12, and looking at what they put out there, it was like, well, we're doing a lot of this already. But, when you think about diversity, equity, diversity, variety. I mean, just the brains in the classroom. Yeah. There's a variety of brains. So we've got, race, ethnicity, culture, sexual orientation, cognitive ability. Now, the cognitive and physical ability are 2 additions to the typical DEI resolution that Pleasantville has included. And I think that that's really important because we made a big commitment to the special ed community a long time ago, and learning differences doesn't mean that you're deficient.
Right.
It's a skill.
Exactly.
And when you see some of our fantastic entrepreneurs and inventors who had dyslexia or whatever, so to bring all of those diversities into the front and center.
Yeah, I think a big thing for both of us is, representation matters, and representation in all facets matter. And, as a country, I think we have a lot to do. And, in terms of everything that's going on, it always starts back in your local community. And if this is like the one step that we can start to do to help build that better future for everyone, I think this is where we need to like initiate some of those things. Because, representation matters. It sticks with children as they enter into adulthood. And so to make sure that everyone feels seen and heard and celebrated, I think is a really important initiative for Dan and I.
And the word belonging, that was another word that we added to our resolution that's not in most of your DEI resolutions. And belonging is to be a part of, to be a member.
Yeah.
And we want every student, every staff to feel that we're part of this, district, part of this community. And it's the language. What's the language that is needed? If a kid is not feeling good, if a kid is feeling something, or a teacher, to have that language to be able to say to the teacher, this isn't working for me, in a respectful manner. Like, I can't do it this way. Or you used a word that makes me feel uncomfortable. And we want the teachers, as everybody, to be able to, So there's a certain amount of professional development that goes into that.
Yeah.
As you were saying before, teaching the master's degree for education, there's a lot of things that are not covered.
Right. Exactly. And, for teachers who have been teaching for a while, a lot has changed even in a short time.
Oh my God.
When you think about vernacular and how that has shifted over time, when you think about social emotional learning and the role that that's playing, similar to the role that literacy played about, 10 years ago, where that was a big initiative. All teachers are literacy teachers. I think that really what our work boils down to is that we want to better understand our students and what their needs are. What are the areas that are, maybe blind spots to them, because we are a small community. How can we open up their minds to what's going on in the outside world? How do we get to know our students so we're better able to serve them in the classroom? How do we empower teachers to enact the curriculum and to, allow students to have a voice in the classroom? Oftentimes teachers were kind of, built to, this is the learning objective. This is where I want to start the lesson and where I want to end. And it can be a little uncomfortable to veer off of that and have discussions that are uncomfortable. That's difficult.
But that's what education is all about.
Exactly.
And if you plan your curriculum, your modules, okay, day one I'm doing this, day two. Well, if there's a conversation going on, hopefully your superiors give you that flexibility to say, okay, if it's going to take you 4 days to get through this material because of a conversation, we want you to, I would think you would
honestly,
need that flexibility.
that's when the best learning happens, is when you kind of go off script and you adapt to what's going on in the classroom. And sometimes it only happens in one of your classes and not the other classes, and that's okay, because at least you had that conversation with some students who wanted to engage in that and who feel really passionate about it, and being able to allow them to have those conversations, I think, is really powerful as well.
Yeah, and that is some of the feedback that we've received from teachers and some of the curriculum coordinators that we've spoken to, is that, there has been feedback from teachers as they are, teaching units that, at the elementary school, they're doing the rock unit, what makes you unique.
Yeah, I love that. And they're going to do all these painted rocks.
Yeah. And that's one initiative. There have been teachers who've said, listen, this is a little bit, this could go a lot of different ways here. What are we going to do with that? And really just empowering them to, like you said, go off script. It's okay.
To go off script and have the language, because, I have my background. I come from where I come from. And if I'm having a conversation with somebody who's from a different background, particularly if I'm the teacher or the supervisor, I want to be able to not be awkward. Or if I am awkward, how do I deal with that? So that, is part of the professional development to get and that's why like the SEL, the social emotional learning, is such a big part of this as well.
Yeah, I think it all goes together. I think diversity, equity, inclusion, SEL, mindfulness, like it's all about the inherent self and just providing, and enhancing our community in those different facets. And I think it all works together. You can't have one without the other.
You can't have one without the other. There's no one size fits all. And it's something that we have argued about with the state for years. I mean, New York State is a giant state, from the tip of Buffalo to the tip of Long Island. But even within our own community, there's no one size fits all. Because, I mean, a teacher has 20 kids in the classroom. That's 20 different brains.
Yeah, exactly.
Of different cultures and everything. So, as far as what you're going to be creating, will you be developing everything? Will you be where are you going to get all this new stuff?
So I think that's a little combination of both. I think we see ourselves as, coordinators, making sure that there's efforts going on K-12, and then also being like a liaison to each of the schools, and then even working with teachers to help develop their own curriculum that will be really, beneficial for each of their particular subjects and classrooms and things like that. One of the big initiatives that we want to do is kind of our themes of the year, where each year we present a different theme that we want to, for next year it would be Voices of Joy, so celebration of cultures and diversity and inclusion. And so that way the efforts that are going on in kindergarten have the same not application, but the same mindset and theme going on here at the high school.
That's nice.
And so we kind of have this almost like the Board of Ed's strategic 5-year plan.
Yes.
We took a page out of your book.
Good.
We kind of developed, a 5-year plan in terms of these themes and, building upon each layer, starting with celebration. Because I think a big thing that is missing in DEI work is just celebration. It's not necessarily resistance or the horror stories, but it's also the celebration of joy and the amazingness of culture, race, ethnicity, physical and cognitive ability. And so if we celebrate first, then we can really dive in further deeper, because you have a better understanding of where those cultures are coming from.
Right. Start from the strength. Start from the joy, the uniqueness, don't start from the negative. Start from the positive.
Exactly.
And embrace all of that. I love that.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the idea of representation matters. And because if you're celebrating that representation rather than focusing on negative things that did and have happened in history, it brings a different dimension to what you're talking about in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that, I think lends itself well to student voice being part of the curriculum.
Student voice is critical.
We all have a story, we all have a background, and being able to celebrate that and to share it with others is a great platform, and I'm really excited for that. That was breaking news, by the way. We haven't shared that with too many people.
Yeah, that was breaking news.
So,
when the students are engaged, instead of, education in the olden days was the teacher standing up in front of the room and talking over all the heads, and the kids just, almost like literally the information just went in. But when they're engaged, and they're part of the conversation. I mean, one of the biggest things that, we celebrate is that student council meeting with the board in December. Sit down at the table with us. Tell us what you need. Because that's why we're here.
Yeah.
It's not so that you can, stand up and tell people what you think. You want to help these kids grow and become the amazing creatures that they're going to grow and become. So if they're sitting at the table and we hear what they need.
And I think that kind of goes back to when you asked what our role is going to be. Again, we want to be a liaison between the community, between parents, between teachers, between students. We want to hear all of those ideas and then somehow figure out a way what's best for the students and how can we implement this in our schools.
Pull it all in.
Yeah.
The homeschool connection is huge.
Yeah.
And one of the things, with my own kids, I've always said to the teacher, well, what language are you using in the classroom? Because I want to make sure that I'm saying the same things at home. Because too often, particularly when the kids are little, well, that's not what the teacher says, or that's not the word that the teacher, that she doesn't do it that way. And it's all right, so how does the teacher do it? So we want to make sure that, so maybe will you see, because now we do already have a link on the website. Do you see that will get populated with some of the information information and
Yes,
content?
absolutely. And I think a big piece of it too will be to educate families
Yeah.
in the work that's going on in each grade level, so they're aware, maybe it's supplemental materials that they would like to share with their children in their home. Maybe it's, making, conversation in the home about, this has been my experience, this is, I know what you're talking about in school right now. And I think that really where we would like to get to is a point where it's part of the culture at Pleasantville, and that it's part of each class, and it's not really a standalone class like, okay, today we're going to talk about Voices of Joy. It's every day or pretty darn close to it. We're going to be able to find those leverage points and
It's
say,
woven.
It's woven in.
It's like a fabric. And I think some of the things that, it's about fear. It's about what's different. Okay, this is different. I don't know how to deal with something that's different from what I know. And, when you are from a certain area and you don't travel outside of that area, it can be scary.
Absolutely.
We have some families that travel all over the world every other minute, and as soon as they can, they're on airplanes and going places. And then we have other families where they pretty much stay close to home. So, learning that language and learning that, different isn't bad.
Right.
It's not scary, but how do I look at that?
Yeah,
Right.
and I think that's where the voices of joy, and so, instead of kind of looking at change as a fearful thing, even though change is really hard, it's let's celebrate and diversify and include. I think that's a big, DEI is about inclusion, and I think that's a big part of that as well.
Right. There was one of the slides, I just want to see if I have it in my pieces of paper here. One of the slides in that presentation was so awesome from the middle school there was all these words from the students. We can educate people. We saw what bias looks like. I think differently now. We can be upstanders. Diversity of thought. There were so many fabulous, just like this one little slide is almost a year's worth of stuff.
Yeah, for
absolutely.
sure. And that's it's very encouraging. And again, it speaks to the efforts that K-12 are already being made in this area. And our role, again, is to synergize those efforts. How do we connect the dots? How do we make everything flow from kindergarten through 12th grade? We're building on skills. And I think that, as we were talking about before, a lot of these are skill deficits. It's not something that students are necessarily explicitly taught in the classroom, and we are seeing that more and more. And that's why every teacher is really the teacher that can be doing this work.
And their life skills.
Their life skills.
You're out in the universe, you're working with people of all different kinds, and you have to figure out a way to get along. And, when you're in school, you're with the same age group.
Yeah.
Well, once you get out into the working world, number one, there's an age diversity. And everything else in between. And you have to be able to learn how to navigate that. And that's back to the language, learning how to have that language to speak up for what it is that you need and how you need it. The thing that's great is that you now have, all our communities around us. So I would imagine that you can share and learn from some of your colleagues in other districts across the state, across the country.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? We've already got some partners that we've been working with. We have new partners coming in. It's constantly...
And constantly just, as individuals building and evolving ourselves, maybe reading new books ourselves or watching new movies that that we wouldn't have necessarily watched, in different, in the past. And so kind of not only professional development, but individual development as well, I think is a key piece.
And some of it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Being uncomfortable means that you're
growing.
And
gotta get out of the comfort zone.
That's we have to get out of our comfort zone and move on from there. So okay, so I'm just looking down at my notes. What else do we we could sit here, this is something that with every conversation I have, I'm like, we could sit here all day. But I think we really gotten through. It's an exciting time. I talked with Melanie already, so she shared how she's going to be working with the curriculum and everything that you just said. I love that next year is the theme of joy.
Yes.
Joy is something that we don't celebrate enough. I actually, there's something called a joy jar where people, that like helps with your mood, and I give joy jars to my family.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's
Well,
cool.
Like these little
let's
things,
talk.
like remember when you did this really well. Remember
I love
when you
that.
did that really well. And when you're having a crummy day, you open up the jar and it's like, oh yeah, I did that. And it's just like a little ray of sunshine and just makes you feel better. So,
yeah, that's great. And those ideas, we love to hear those ideas. And I would say from our experience so far, so many teachers have been excited about partnering with us. So many, like I said, the curriculum coordinators, principals. I mean, if anything, I was concerned that maybe there wouldn't be enough of that collaboration. I would say, if anything, the opposite has been true.
And we have a community organization that's, looking forward to joining and sharing and providing input, because, you have families that, you have people in the village who might not have children in the district yet, or their kids are older, that they also have some perspective. So the people from that committee are also, looking forward to sharing and whatever.
That's great. We look forward to working with them.
Yeah, and as a teacher in this district, I'm just so happy that our district is putting forth these efforts and actually doing this. I don't live here in the village. I can't speak to what's going on in my home district, but to know that I'm working in a district that is trying to provide these services and this inclusionness makes me feel good as a person and as a teacher. It starts in our classrooms.
Right.
That's where we teach our students. That's how they grow up to be functioning members of society.
It's true. It's all about education.
Yeah,
everything.
so
anything you see in the news, it's like, well, we need to educate these people so they understand what's really going on here.
Yeah.
It's all about education.
Yep.
So we're excited, we're happy, we're thankful as well.
Looking forward to, the work has just begun. We're excited.
All right, well, this is great. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Inside Pleasantville and diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. And we have a great road ahead.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right. I'd like to thank Rikki, Dan, and Melanie for the conversation. We are all, students, staff, and community, looking forward to building on the work that has already begun in the district. Thank you for joining us. Please look for the next edition of Inside Pleasantville Schools as we continue the conversation. Have a great day.